wonderful to see so many of you here in this one place. I am coming in my second year of Yale Divinity School. I'm halfway through almost exactly my Master's of Divinity, which is only the first part of my training towards ordination. I'll have some more steps to go through, but it does still feel like a significant halfway mark. So I invite you to continue helping me to learn. I'm preaching to you today, but I have many more things to find out about what makes a good sermon, so please let me know if you have any ideas afterwards. Protect me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel. In the night also my heart instructs me. I keep the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand. I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad, and my soul rejoices. My body also rests secure. The psalmist whose voice we heard today told God, "In you I take refuge." How brave that is to claim a place of peace to depend on. I imagine that many of you have come to church this morning out of a cloud of competing voices, hoping that you might find a way towards some refuge of your own. That cloud of competing voices takes many different forms. Maybe it was the sound of something annoying you when you heard someone say it as you were making a quick stop at the grocery store earlier. Or maybe you turned off the radio in your car just before you walked in and you're still thinking about fires in California or the grief of families recovering from violence. Maybe you're still sitting here and hearing a round of voices in your head, organizing the rest of your day after you walk out of the sanctuary and back into this world. We are all together afloat on a sea of contradicting, anxious, energized voices that compete for our attention. Among all of those voices competing for attention, it can be very difficult to figure out which voice, if any, is speaking the truth. Firm facts feel very hard to track down and even harder to believe in, and firm faith can feel pretty much impossible. Very rarely do I summon the courage to pray through all of those voices with the clarity of this psalmist, who said to God with confidence, "I take refuge in you." And so I wonder how today's gospel reading from Mark sounded to you, with all of this apocalyptic talk from Jesus about wars and destruction and birth pains. Did this peculiar apocalypticism of Jesus' teaching slip right in among those voices that are competing for your attention? This reading was so fast and furious, with gloom strung together in simple, urgent language. And it seemed to me almost as if it could fit into one little panel in a comic book. Mark doesn't waste any time at all getting to the point, and that point is pretty bleak. I admit that I have struggled to appreciate the particularly terse tone of St. Mark, especially when there are three other smoother and more lyrical gospels to choose from. I often feel like the pleading disciples do in this passage. Please, anything to help me interpret the signs that you're showing me here, because I don't get it. But this semester, I've had the chance to learn a few things about the Gospel of Mark that have helped me come around a little bit. First, I learned the style of Mark's writing, when compared to the smoother synoptic Gospels and the fanciful Gospel of John, helps scholars guess it was the first of the canon to be written, the very first account of Jesus to be set down in Greek. And I learned that this little fragment of doominess and gloominess that we read today can provide a lot of insight into the historical moment when Mark wrote his gospel. The big debate about Mark, which is ongoing with scholars even though they've kind of reached a conclusion, is exactly when he was writing. If he was the first to write, that would probably mean he was the closest person to the living time of Jesus, right? So that could tell us a lot about the life of Jesus. If we knew exactly when Mark set down this first account of Jesus Christ, maybe we'd come a little bit closer to the kind of firm evidence we'd like to use to believe in all this faith stuff. And maybe like the disciples, we'd get some instruction about how to interpret the signs of Jesus' life. Firm evidence might be really nice, because a window into faith that we peer through in a short gospel reading is grim. Jesus just sits there, imagining that the temple has been taken down, there's no stone stacked upon another stone, and he's warning his disciples about a time of desolation, telling them that any pain they feel now is only the beginning of a time to come. Listening to those warnings from Jesus, I can hear him chiming in with all the voices around me, in my head or on the radio or on the phone, calling my attention to the things that I worry about the most, losing the places or people or traditions that I love the most. I also learned that this passage in Mark 8 is one of a group of clues that scholars have to date this gospel text. They assess that Mark is probably featuring this temple in ruin as a response to the Jewish-Roman War in about the 60s AD. So that means Mark was writing just about the time when the central temple for all of Jewish faith was actually destroyed, though it's difficult to say exactly when. The loss of that temple then completely changed Jewish life. Their faith had been ordered around the central authority of one temple, and without it, many old and intricate laws that uphold religious practices would have to change really quickly. And even so, there was still going to be chaos. The absence of the temple would come with significant grief about a past life and worry about a future one. It would be no surprise that Jesus would comment on such an important thing. But what scholars can't decide about this passage with Jesus and the symbol of the temple is whether Mark was writing about it just before or just after the temple was actually destroyed. Mostly they think it was written just before, but there's still a shadow of a doubt. Maybe Mark had watched the temple fall. In that case, he wrote about Jesus warning his disciples as part of an important memory of the prophetic oracle. Or maybe Mark hadn't seen the temple fall, but he feared it. In that case, he wrote about Jesus warning his disciples as part of recording a possible outcome. Or maybe Mark had sorted through all of his notes on Jesus, wishing Jesus had spoken directly about the destruction of the temple, and he kind of dreamed the whole warning up. These are only a fraction of the possible explanations for the historicity of the text that different people in different traditions and different modes of scholarship have chosen, and each explanation can feel comforting for a totally different reason. No matter what, though, there are many unresolved questions that remain when you try to pinpoint Jesus' advice to a particular moment in history so that it might help you better compare with your own. Even if scholars have some kind of a clue as to when this was written, the specific moment that Mark was writing to eludes them completely, and the words of Jesus are just kind of floating somewhere in the air between the past and future of this very important temple. With all of these different and very compelling possibilities contained in this tiny little gospel that we read, how are we supposed to use it to help us navigate all of the voices that I was just describing in our world of ours? How are we brave enough, like the psalmist, to seek refuge in this ancient text when all we're given is doom and gloom? The many different possible truths that this tiny little bit of text preserved help me process what it feels like to be really worried about something. The way the disciples are when they pull Jesus to a corner and ask him quietly, could you just give us a better explanation of what you said before, which you'll notice he doesn't do. And it makes me think about the kinds of temples that are in all of our lives, the things that help us keep everything else in order, the truths that we really have to believe in to be able to get through everything else. I wonder what you worry about losing the most. When I'm worrying a lot about a temple in my life that could be lost, and there are plenty of them, there are relationships or jobs or forests or anything, I find myself caught in the same tug of war that these scholars are between past and future that preoccupies them so much when they're trying to date this text. When I worry, I hear many voices moving swiftly between the past and the present moment, thinking about a litany of my past mistakes, wondering about all of the uncertainties of the future, and I feel kind of lost in the shuffle. The holidays that are coming soon can be an especially fruitful time for many great things, but also for worrying. This week of Thanksgiving, with family gathered around or family very far away, we have a very special opportunity to contemplate our past and to look at our futures, wondering where all the time goes, fearing too much that we don't know what to do with the time that we have. It can be the hardest thing of all to pinpoint exactly this present moment we're in and pay attention to it, offering full gratitude not for anything in particular other than the chance to be experiencing exactly what we are. For better or for worse, Jesus is calling his disciples to pay attention to what's happening around them in this text. He doesn't give them exactly the answer they want. He doesn't tell them about exactly what time he's referring to. He just asks them to notice the great upheaval surrounding them, beginning now, starting to have murmurs in their present moment. He tells them, notice this destruction. Notice the darkness over there. This moment right here may not be good, but it is the beginning. As I count my blessings as I approach this time of Thanksgiving, I've spent some time reflecting what gratitude really looks like to me today, when there's so much wrong, so many voices. And I've been amazed to discover that the most grateful people I've met in recent days are not the ones who have necessarily received the most good news. This semester, I've been taking a prison ministry course with 12 students from Yale Divinity School and 12 inmates in the Danbury Federal Correction Institution. We are all assigned the exact same readings and homework responsibilities, so we're all just classmates together learning. Each week we meet in the prison, which takes an hour drive through all the winding roads of Connecticut and an hour back. And there, while we have 2 hours together, we go over what we've learned from our assignments. When a professor in that class asked my classmates and I about our life of prayer, one inmate spoke up immediately. She told us that every morning she thanks God for the chance to open her eyes to a new day. And every night she thanks God for every single thing that happened to her that day, good or bad, because it had moved her further along her path. That's what keeps her going, she told us, gratitude. Without any way of knowing for sure exactly when Mark wrote down this grim premonition of Jesus's about what was to come, we can't attach his words to the completion of a certain past or to the anticipation of any kind of certain future. Time has swept away all of those facts from this text, and the good news of this gospel comes from a completely different source of truth. The truth that even when the specifics of a moment in time elude us, they do not ever elude Jesus Christ. In his human form, Jesus knows our anguish and he knows our joy. In his divine form, he knows our beginning and he knows our end. We can never discover the goodness of this gospel by seeking one particular truth because we'll never get it. We can only use this gospel to help us better hear the voice of Jesus, who is always at our side, to help us pay attention to the present moment, to take refuge, as the psalmist did, in the fact that we are standing exactly where we are right now. So as you go back out into the world, approaching the daunting task of standing at some uncertain point between the past and the future, as you do every single day, I urge you to walk with the faith of St. Mark, so alert to the moments he was witnessing that he wrote down the life of Jesus with great haste, choosing words as quick and simple as he could to share this story among his fellow people who knew a deep time of grief. Remember that where you are, Jesus stands with you, recognizing it all for exactly what it is, holding all of your grief as he holds your joy. May you approach this moment right now, between the past and the future, with the simple gratitude that you are there to receive it. Remember that this is but the beginning. What a gift we have been given, to begin again and again and again until we meet our eternal rest, where Jesus waits.